Are you looking for a productive procrastination technique that is absolutely foolproof? Well, look no further than me, Katie, moodboard lover, to teach you that method so you can procrastinate as much as you want. Almost 3 years ago exactly, I created a guide to making aesthetic mood boards, and while I do stand by all the tips and advice I gave in that video, I think it's about time for a revamp. Funnily enough, I did rewatch that video, obviously, in preparation of making this video, and I realized I was making mood boards for my self-indulgent vampire novel, which is the project that I'll be making mood boards for in this video. Kind of going full circle jerk here. Also, the fact that it's been 3 years since I worked on that novel. Jeez, my God. Whew. Let's begin with the mood board making process and the program and all the nitty-gritty details that you need in order to actually start making mood boards. In the past, I've used Paint and PixArt and PicMonkey, but I really like using Canva now. I started using it not long before I made my Eclipse Project mood board videos, and now I have some features that I like to use that Canva has already built in that I didn't know back then. And luckily, these features actually make the mood board making process so much easier and actually a lot faster. First, I typically make my mood boards to be Instagram post size. I just like the square and it usually fits all the pictures well, and if I want to post it, it's easy and I don't have to fiddle with resizing. Then I use this Canva frame feature. I believe these come with the free version, but I do pay for Pro since I use it so much, so let me know if you have the free version, if it does work for you. I hope it does. Anyway, these frames make it really easy for you to drop your photos in, which I will show you later. But recently I've been spending so much more time curating a 9-photo frame mood board. But you don't have to use the even square frames. There are dozens of different frames to choose from. I've used these funkier ones to make my mood boards for my flash fiction project back in NaNoWriMo 2021, and I believe these frames go up to as big as 12 or 16 squares, which means you can make even bigger ones than just the 9 frame. Now, I usually make 2 kinds of mood boards, a project mood board and a character mood board. I have even made place and setting mood boards, but that's usually rarer for me. Maybe that's why I'm worse at setting description, but that's a topic for another day. So here I have made a mood board card for each of the main characters and one more for the actual project. I already have a project mood board. This is what it looks like, and I like it enough that I don't want to make another one for this video. I'm sorry. But of course you may be asking yourself, Katie, how do I even find photos? Well, I use Pinterest. I've used it for years and I've definitely cultivated a large selection of photographs over dozens of projects, both active and shelved, and I found the algorithm to be the most effective for me, maybe because I've been using it for 10 years consistently. A technique that I've started using on Pinterest is to make the body of the board very general overlook of the project itself, and then I make individual sections within the board to cultivate the vibes of the characters. If I have a big cast, I will sometimes split the sections into wider categories, like the Eclipse Project, for example. I have these sectioned into country, character type, even specific royal houses. Really, it's up to you and your project. Luckily, Be Gay, Soft Crime, Drink Blood, or the aforementioned self-indulgent vampire novel, has a relatively small core cast. 6 characters that I think play a pretty important part over multiple books, including our main character Khloe, who is our only POV, which if you know me, you're gasping right now. Now, I actually have a pretty small Pinterest board for Be Gay, Soft Crime, Drink Blood, so for this next part, I'm going to be diving more into how I find all these pictures and how I kind of cultivate my Pinterest board. For this, the search bar is your best friend. I find using keywords the best way to find what you're looking for. Some searches I do for this are obviously going to be vampire, gothic, mystery, and then I'll either use the word aesthetic or photography behind the word to get a really aesthetic or vibey photo. There are also these helpful keywords on the top after you've searched for something that other users have used in order to narrow down their search, and you can click on any of these if they resonate with you, and they will bring you to another page that is more curated for these keywords. For example, this gives me Victorian, which is perfect because the world is based off of Victorian aesthetics, even if the book does take place in a secondary world. Other keywords I use are generally color related. For each of my characters, regardless of the story, I tend to give them a color palette. This doesn't just help me in finding photos for the mood boards, it does give me a grasp on how to describe them as well. Khloe, our main character, for example, is very monochrome. Washed out white and stormy gray are 2 of her colors, but I do like to put in pops of red because, of course, she's a vampire. A little on the nose, but whatever. Of course, you can pick more than just 2 or 3 colors. Perhaps your character epitomizes jewel tones or pastels. You could also just limit them to a single color. I certainly have my fair share of monochromatic characters, and this actually makes mood boarding much easier because all of the photos will be generally within the same color family, which is easier to work with. I didn't do that for any of these characters, but it's fine. Other strategies for finding pins are thinking about the elements of your book. If you're writing a contemporary or a book that's based off a real place, I love using Pinterest to find inspiration for the place itself. Ventress, the city where Be Gay, Soft Crime, Drink Blood takes place, is based off of New Orleans, so I use a lot of New Orleans keywords to try to find photos that invoke the New Orleans spirit. If you're writing a book about witches or magic, keywords surrounding that are a great place to start gathering images. photos. Obviously, if you have an actor that is a face claim for your character, you can find great GIFs and images on Pinterest as opposed to just Googling them. I will say my tip for that though is using the word photo shoot or model after their name, which will give you more professional looking photos that you can add into your Pinterest board. If you're finding a lot of photos that you like, but you want it to be more specific to this one photo, you can click on that photo and scroll down. The algorithm will spit back photos that are visually or thematically similar based on what other users have clicked on. Pinterest's algorithm is pretty smart. Okay, so now you've curated and collected all of the pins on your Pinterest board. What now? I usually feel like I flesh it out once I'm reached over 100 pins, but I certainly have boards with a ton more than that, and a Pinterest board is ever evolving, and you can always add more or different pictures as you write your novel or revise it or change it over time. Which this leads me into my general thesis statement on mood boards. I jokingly said at the beginning of this video that I use this as a productive procrastination technique, but I do believe that this is an integral and important part of the planning process. Can it be procrastination? Of course. But it's also about finding the right vibes to tap into. Pictures can spark scenes, characters, ideas, all of which build towards the novel. I also like to use my mood board making as a way of learning about my characters. Like I said, I always have a color palette for my characters, which I suss out during the mood board making process. I often have to think about their hobbies, their style, their personality, what they like and don't like. What kind of neon sign would they own? What kind of dog would they have? Does their family have an emblem or crest that resonates with them? Do they tend to have a motif? All of these questions and things that go into mood board making are super important to me and my cultivation of characters and stories. So while yes, mood board making can be just a bit of fun, I do think that mood board making is also beneficial to the writing process. Okay, now that I'm off my soapbox for the day, let's talk about my characters and how I did my mood boards. Now we're into the nitty gritty. I've already pulled all the photos for each of the mood boards because I tend to flip back and forth between Canva to Pinterest and back, and I know that can be kind of confusing. So we're gonna actually focus solely on the curation once you have your collection of images. I usually pull more than what I need and then I can fiddle and move them as needed. If you see new ones pop up through the magic of editing, it's because I didn't want to make y'all sick with the rapid flipping back and forth between web pages. So let's start with our main character and POV, khloe aeris. Now, she has always been a main character, but I have recently combined another character with her, getting rid of his story and simply giving it to her, because to be honest, it didn't make sense as to why he had a more interesting backstory than her, but we move. So for every mood board like this, I usually put a face claim or a person who I imagine looks like my character in the center and build the rest of the mood board around that picture. I always start off kind of randomly throwing pictures together, just trying to get a vibe. Sometimes I get pretty close to what I want immediately, but others, like khloe, I struggle to get the pictures to sit right. My strategy, unfortunately, is very feel-based. And over the years, I've started to understand what I like in a mood board. Since I gathered all my pictures from Pinterest, it isn't often that all the pictures have the same lighting, temperature, shadows, etc. So I do try to align them in an aesthetically pleasing way and try to match up the photos that have similar color stories and hues. This isn't always possible though, so I do have to pull more photos so I can mix and match and find the best arrangement. I don't pretend to be the best mood board maker in the world, but I've made a lot of them over the years, and I do think I'm much better than I was 3 years ago. As for khloe as a character, she's the one that's probably changed the least as opposed to my other 5 characters. I think I understand her character, but her mood board is a little bit more difficult to figure out. There is a harsh juxtaposition to her. She's both grumpy and sunshine, honest and opaque. And of these 6, she's actually the only vampire, funnily enough, so I do have to put some bloody imagery in there. Duh. You can use the editing tools that are on Canva or in your other program of choice. I do find that preset filters end up making the photos look a little harsh with their coloring, but sometimes I do use them to try to attempt to make images look similar if they don't already look similar by changing their sharpness or brightness or temperature. It is really hard to find a collection of photos that are all edited the same way or have the same hues, so sometimes I do try to fake it. Not well, but I do try, and I think that's what matters. So next we're going to move on to the princess, Ingrid. She is the love interest, and she's the reason that khloe gets involved in the case that it is, because unfortunately it is one of Ingrid's friends that is murdered. Ingrid's character has really stayed the same, although I don't believe she was originally a love interest when I wrote her, but she kind of became that over the story. I've described her as pragmatic, practical, and a protective woman. She's moral, just, and kind, but definitely not without her faults. She definitely works herself to the bone. She has a bit of a temper and a tendency to bully people to get what she wants because she believes it's for the best. She's passionate, sometimes short-sighted, basically in a nutshell, a very type A Virgo. But she is also sophisticated, which is why I chose a lot of soft creams, but also golds for her, because she's also, you know, a princess. I did add the picture that says she's not a soft gay, but an angry gay, because at her core, it's true. She loves dogs, but also burning things, mostly because she can get away with it. And of course, Khloe brings it out in her, which is why she tries to avoid her attraction to Khloe, because this kind of side of her she isn't as fond of. Next, let's move on to Viktor. He is the main police inspector within the series, and in the original draft, he was much less of a presence within the novel, but now that I have a lot more room and words to expand, I hope to bring more of him in the novel and actually explore his character a little bit more. This obviously means I have to learn more about him as a character if I'm going to do this. As an inspector, I originally wrote him as being the very tired, quiet kind of cop who observes and waits and kind of doesn't say much. I'd like to expand upon this and continue to have him be kind-hearted, but like Rafferty, his sergeant, he is bound by duty and by rules, which is kind of why he lets Khloe run free as she will. She can do what he can't, so he lets her do that. I think of him as very clever, very oceanic, very deep, and he does trust Khloe, even if he doesn't go to bat for her all the time. So he is protective of his job and the people who actually work for him, which does piss Khloe off. I will not lie. But yeah, I overall really like the earthy tones that I've given to him, the emeralds, the kind of imagery of both a police officer but also a chess master. That's kind of Viktor in a nutshell of what I know of him at the moment. Next, we have one of my favorites, Cosette. She's the editor-in-chief of the city newspaper, and also she's Khloe's ex. X in the picture. They work together closely anyway, which causes some delicious tension. I definitely like Cosette. She was a fun addition to the original draft, and she kind of came out of nowhere, but I like her so much that I'm keeping her and letting her shine within the story. She lives above a bookshop, which is a fun little thing I decided to add, and she's ambitious with a capital A. I describe her color palette as like maroon, orange, and brown. She gives off the vibe of coffee, so highly energetic, pomegranate, sultry, and a little mysterious, and old books. She's always digging into the details and the story of it all, which makes sense. She is a journalist. And the bookstore that she lives above is owned by her grandmother, so I am kind of interested in adding this kind of, elderly grandmother spunky moment that a lot of mysteries I feel like have that I've heard of and read. So she overall does become really integral in the murder mystery solving, as well as becoming more of a friend to Khloe, which does mean that I get to make Ingrid wildly jealous of her. And have a little bit of character tension there. Next, we have Dr. Sylvia Verninac, the medical examiner. I will admit not much is known about her within the story, but she's definitely a dark academia girly, and she has a pet raven. She wouldn't call it a pet, but he does follow her around and she gives him nibbles of whatever sweets she has in her pocket. Sylvia is a very cool customer, and Khloe struggles to figure out what she's all about, which is like one of Khloe's favorite things. She describes her as a puzzle box, and this is because Sylvia likes to keep her private life just that, private. But one of her fun things is she does indulge in all of Khloe's hypothetical wild hair thought experiments, which is fun to write. Sylvia wears a lot of tweed and carries books and a pocket watch and her trusty bag of medical examiner tools. She's eccentric, but in a fun way. And I've really enjoyed giving all of the oddities to Sylvia, because why not? She's the scientist, but she's also a quirky woman who likes shiny objects and sweets and ticking clocks and ravens. I am kind of obsessed with her. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have Hayden Rafferty. Much like Viktor and Sylvia, Rafferty was a minor character in the original draft. However, he was more of an antagonistic force, and he didn't have much depth beyond being the annoying sergeant stereotype. And while I will be keeping his little spats with Khloe, I do want to explore his character more. The best way I can describe him is lawful good. He's a former soldier, and I describe his color palette as monochromatic but with bronze, which I think came together here quite well. I think there's a chance he'll end up as quite a foil for Khloe. While she is definitely good, she's also chaotic, so she's chaotic good to his lawful good. She's the one to go off and do her own thing, while Rafferty is really tradition, honor, excellence, courage, love, hope. Those are what all he aspires to. Those are the things, the duty that binds him to this job. Does he reach it? We don't know yet. And so those are all of my characters. So after making several versions of each of these mood boards, I then went and decided to compare them. I find this is hard to do on the actual page since I'm kind of constantly moving things around and making different versions of it. So I make a new canvas and I put them together and go from there. I spend a lot of time actually trying to decide which one I like best. And honestly, most of the time the differences between them are very subtle. I don't know if you'll be able to tell since I've sped up this footage quite a bit, so we're not here for the full hour I spent fiddling with these mood boards, but I like to see which one draws my eye. I did separate them on their individual individual boards so I can differentiate where one begins and another ends, but it is still a little difficult, so for that I do apologize. But whichever one draws my eye the most is usually the one that I go with, and then I delete the other ones, deciding on which one I will then inevitably post or put in a video or something. The exception for this is that I gave both Ingrid and Cosette 2 mood boards. This is because I gave them an additional mood board with the center photo that isn't specifically a face claim. I like these two with the different silhouettes in the middle, so I kept those, and I also put them in the Scrivener files, but they're not actually the mood boards that I'd ever like put on like the screen if I was talking about a character. So yes, here is all the mood boards up close. I am happy with how each of them turned out, and I think it really helped me solidify certain aspects of each of the characters that I wasn't sure of or just didn't know. I hope this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments if you were inspired to make your own mood boards, and definitely don't hesitate to share them with me. If you want to see or hear more of my rambling voice, you can subscribe. Good luck with your mood boards, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.